Welcome back. We're diving deep into an ambitious study, ELO versus ABBA, the 70s battle for sonic supremacy, pitting Jeff Lynne's orchestral maximalism against ABBA's engineered pop clarity.
Right.
And the material is, it's rich, it's super technical, and it does a great job establishing that philosophical split in production.
Yeah.
I really like the detail here. You get right down to the specific gear, the Harrison consoles, the C414 mics, and that great distinction between ELO's live string sections and ABBA's sort of faux disco strings.
That foundation is rock solid. The author has perfectly set up the two camps. You have Lynne, the singular rock auteur fighting with his analog gear.
Yeah.
And then you have the ABBA trinity, Benny, Bjorn, and their engineer Michael Tretow, who were just obsessed with transparency. All the pieces are here.
Okay, so now we just need to zoom out a bit and make sure all those technical points serve the strongest possible argument about the why, the core idea of, compromise versus control.
Precisely. Let's start with ELO, specifically with that signature saturated sound.
Okay, so I think the most objective proof you have for the contrast between ELO's constrained sound and ABBA's precision is kind of buried as an aside right now. It really should be central.
I think I see where you're going. The argument leans a little too much on subjective stuff.
Exactly.
Things like the FM boxiness of ELO versus the sparkle of ABBA. We all know what that means if we listen to 70s radio, but it's still just perception.
Right, but you have this incredible piece of objective evidence in here. Jeff Lynne's decision, decades later, to just re-record all those classic ELO hits for the Mr. Blue Sky compilation.
That is the definitive admission, isn't it?
It is.
He flat out said the original sound suffered from limitations from his own, quote, lack of experience. He wanted the new ones to be cleaner, clear.
Yeah, more punchy and tidier. That's the smoking gun. It's an admission of analog compromise, and that is what anchors this whole comparison.
And the core problem for both of them back in the 70s was how to get this huge maximalist sound without the 24-track just turning everything to mud.
The old wall of sound problem.
Yeah, that's their shared DNA, right? Phil Spector? They both wanted that density, but unlike Spector, who was okay with a muddy, mono-ish result, they were chasing clarity in stereo.
And Lynne got his density by just pushing the saturation, leaning on really aggressive analog compression to glue it all together. Which, it worked, but it's also what created that low dynamic headroom, that famous FM boxiness.
So the move here is to pull that admission from Lynne right to the forefront, make it the definitive conclusion for the ELO section.
Yes.
Use it to hammer home the point that ABBA's team, Tretow especially, figured out how to get that pristine clarity inside the limits of the 70s.
A feat that Lynne himself basically admits he couldn't pull off until he had modern digital tools.
Right. It turns a historical fact into solid proof of a technical shortcoming back then.
It instantly elevates the whole ELO narrative. The argument shifts from they sound different to their fundamental goals demanded opposite solutions to the same analog problem.
And we can use that to frame some really sharp technical comparisons.
Okay, so let's dig into that compression and headroom point. Lynne's aggressive compression, that's the thing he later tried to fix on the Mr. Blue Sky album. So let's put that directly against Michael Tretow's solution at ABBA.
Tretow was actively engineering space.
Yes. High-frequency headroom. His goal was definition, not just a wall of sound.
And he got that by, of all things, minimizing the cymbals. He hated cymbal wash, said it took up crucial high-frequency space, added phase issues, just mush.
So he would only mic the toms and the kick, often with those AKG C414s, instead of using traditional overheads.
That is it's a staggering difference in philosophy when you lay it out like that.
It really is.
Lynne creates this dense crunch and then fixes it decades later. Tretow designs clarity from the ground up by literally removing the things that cause analog mush in the first place.
ABBA's process feels like industrial design. Structural precision. ELO's feels more like rock painting, just going for maximum texture.
And the strings are another perfect example of this. ELO was all about that acoustic fusion, flying in the Munich Symphony Orchestra. It adds so much character, so much warmth, but also...
So many analog phase issues and bleed that just adds to that mid-range saturation.
Whereas ABBA just mastered engineered perfection. They layered keyboards, used those synthetic faux disco strings to get something bright, isolated, and perfectly placed in the mix by Tretow.
They traded authenticity for pristine, controlled clarity. It's the ultimate contrast.
That's highly actionable. Okay, let's flip over to the ABBA side. The material does a fantastic job on Tretow's engineering, the pitch shifting, the vara speed.
Right.
But I'm wondering if the argument could better connect why all that engineering was so necessary in the first place. It feels a little separate from their songwriting process.
I agree. The analysis should connect ABBA's unique lyrics-last creative process directly to Tretow's need for that engineered perfection and separation.
The weakness right now is that you treat them as two different things. Here's the studio work, the multi-tracking, the pitch shifting, and over here is the songwriting, where the backing track was done before Bjorn even wrote the lyrics.
But they're not separate threads. They're totally codependent.
Exactly. That bizarre process meant the backing track had to be sonically perfect, but also emotionally versatile. It had to be ready to carry any message from, devastating heartbreak to total joy.
If the track was too specific emotionally or too sonically dense, it would have just limited the lyrical options. That's the connective tissue the draft is missing.
So the challenge wasn't just clarity, it was emotional neutrality, right? How does that actually show up in the studio?
It translates directly into an engineering mandate. The core argument should be that this compositional structure necessitated Tretow's clinical approach.
The vara speed, the pitch shifting, the extreme isolation.
All of it. The backing track had to be a pristine canvas because it was the non-negotiable foundation. It couldn't be mid-range sludge. It couldn't be overly aggressive. It had to be transparent, ready for any lyrical color.
Like with the grand piano, that was often the backbone. And Tretow's famous setup used 3 separate C4-14 mics on the piano alone.
Just for absolute clarity and separation across the whole frequency spectrum.
Because he had to be able to mix that piano perfectly into a track that he didn't know was going to be about a wedding or a divorce yet.
That constraint is absolutely the mother of the invention here. It explains why the engineering became so clinical. It was all in service of the creative process.
We could use some concrete examples to frame this. Like, you mentioned ABBA, trying many different kinds of arrangements, waltz, disco, tango, to find the right musical structure first.
The Winner Takes It All is perfect for this. They did multiple versions of that backing track, just trying to find the perfect feel, long before the devastating lyrics were ever written.
Now, contrast that with Jeff Lynne's all-in-one vision, where the texture and the composition just evolved together.
A great ELO example is The Way Life's Meant to Be. Lynne took his Spectre-style production and just retrofitted it to include these Latin influences. Putting castanets in the track, the sound and the song were born at the same time.
It shows ABBA's production was a service to the song's eventual message, whereas for ELO, the production was the message. The texture was inseparable from the song.
We should also look at the vocoder. ELO pioneered its use on Mr. Blue Sky, using it as a futuristic, textural instrument. It was part of the Maximalism.
While ABBA used similar tech, but for a totally different reason. On a track like Lay All Your Love on Me, they used a vocoder to simulate a detuned church congregation.
Right.
It was a dense, layered effect, but it was still surgically placed in the mix so it wouldn't crowd the lead vocal. ELO used it for texture. ABBA used it for pristine, separated atmosphere.
That's the ultimate difference. ABBA engineered a clean foundation for the emotion to sit on top of. Lynne engineered the emotion into the foundation itself.
Okay, let's wrap this up by looking at the logical endpoint of these two philosophies. That final split needs to be the big finale.
The contrasting relationship each of them had with digital technology is the ultimate philosophical schism. That split needs to be the final capstone conclusion.
Right now, the weakness is that the material mentions the timeline conflict, but it doesn't exploit its symbolic power.
And the timeline is just staggering. ABBA, driven by this endless need for cleaner separation, gets the 3M 32-track digital recorder in 1981.
Making The Visitors one of the first mainstream digital pop records. It was the logical end of Tretow's quest for zero-compromise clarity.
Exactly. For them, digital was the necessary tool to finally achieve their goal. All that vocal layering without the accumulated noise and phase issues of analog bouncing. Digital gave them the headroom they always wanted.
So at the same time, where's Jeff Lynne?
In the absolute opposite corner. In the mid-'80s, Lynne explicitly rejected digital. He called it, not music, it's a computer thing.
He retreated, back to analog simplicity, 24 tracks, acoustic instruments. It's a powerful so what moment that sums up the whole battle.
Yeah, but there's a risk of just stating it as a fact. This wasn't just a gear choice, was it? It was the ultimate fidelity choice that defined their legacies.
So the suggestion is to frame this as the final test of their philosophies. For ABBA, digital was the solution to achieve pristine separation. For Lynne, it was an existential threat to his whole aesthetic of warmth and saturation.
That choice is the outcome of the battle for sonic supremacy.
Let's make that really clear for the reader. Show their different approaches to reverb in space. On one side, you have ABBA's relentless layering of vocals using eventide harmonizers and pitch shifters.
Techniques that benefited immensely from the clean digital domain. They embraced clean, defined, artificial space.
And on the other side, at the exact same time, you have Lynne retreating to a simple 24-track analog setup, preferring to capture, quote, real room sounds.
He was so against artificial reverb that he made his engineer Mac mic instruments out in the studio corridors and lobbies to get real acoustic space.
That single contrast, the digital pitch shifter seeking surgical perfection versus the engineer in the hallway seeking acoustic authenticity, that's the mic drop.
It summarizes the whole argument, orchestral maximalism versus pop clarity, in one defining image.
And it perfectly sets up their legacies. ABBA's digital foresight and Tretow's methods created the blueprint for the Swedish pop factory, for Max Martin, for the pristine pop that dominates today.
While Lynne's commitment to analog warmth, even compromised warmth, laid the groundwork for so much prog and indie rock. Think of the Flaming Lips or Weezer, bands that actively chase that saturated retro sound. Their final tech choices created two totally different lineages in modern music.
And that concludes our deep dive. The research here is incredible. The technical battlefield is perfectly detailed.
Absolutely. So it seems like the key theme here is just using the primary sources, the artist's own words and actions, more aggressively to prove the core thesis. You've got all the technical details, but the high-level narrative needs to focus more on why those details happened.
Absolutely. So 3 actionable steps. First, reframe Lynne's re-recordings as the key evidence of his 70s analog compromise, a compromise ABBA's engineering avoided.
Right.
Second, explicitly link ABBA's lyrics-last songwriting process to Tretow's engineering mandate for that clinical separation and emotional versatility.
And third?
Use that 1981 technological split, ABBA goes digital for clarity, Lynne rejects it for analog warmth, as the final philosophical statement that defined their legacies.
Execute those changes, and you'll really maximize the impact of your excellent research. We would be thrilled to see you implement these ideas and submit your work back in for more feedback. Until next time, keep refining your work.